This video is sponsored by Extra. In case I don't get it out before Deadpool and Wolverine drops, it's also spoiler-free for that. There's something that's bothered me about seeing Ryan Reynolds' Fox vs. Deadpool careen into the MCU in trailers and promo spots and posters over the past few months. I think some of my Patreon supporters must have had similar feelings, because this month's winning viewer-generated video essay topic was, well, this one. You're watching it. Deadpool, what Fox left out. I think there's the sense among some viewers that Ryan Reynolds, Tim Miller, and David Leitch's take on the character leaves a little to be desired, accuracy-wise, or that its vision of Wade Wilson, the merc with a mouth, is a problematically narrow one. As a result, this video got suggested, won the vote, and my job became to investigate how true this is. So naturally, I went and read every Deadpool comic ever published. To be clear, I don't mean I've read every comic Deadpool's ever appeared in. That would be a far larger and less manageable task. So I've not read all his guest spots. I've not read all of the team books he's been in, X-Force or Avengers or what have you. I've not read all of his spin-off series either, Deadpool Team Up, Deadpool and the Mercs for Money, that sort of thing. All of the above I've dipped into to follow ongoing stories that crossed between books, or just to get a little extra flavor. But what I'm really talking about here is Deadpool, the main series, the one that started with the Circle Chase back in 1993, and which is fresh into its 10th volume this year. I 100%ed it, got the Steam achievement, even the ones that came out after the film did, which, now that I think about it, I probably could have skipped. But every comic published as Deadpool issue or annual something, I've read or reread in the past month for this video, so we can talk with as much background knowledge as is feasible about what Fox left out. Let's start with who's in these movies and who's not. We get Blind Al and Weasel as secondary players here, which is cool. Weasel dates back to the very first Deadpool solo book, penned as it was by the character's creator Fabian Nicieza, and his presence, alongside that of the newly introduced Blind Al, went on to be an important part of Joe Kelly's seminal run a few years later. Beyond these guys, though, most of Deadpool's longtime supporting cast members don't make it on screen. Nobody from Jerry Duggan and Brian Pozane's run on the book, the current Deadpool as the film was being developed, gets a look in, nor do any of Wade's classic merc pals, like Taskmaster or Constrictor. We only see a brief glimpse of Hydra Bob, and he's not even Hydra Bob here, he's Weapon Plus Bob, I guess. A lot of that is obviously due to the rights situation. A lot of these guys were probably off limits for Fox, but aside from Cable and Domino's role in the second film, even the mutant characters the series ended up using aren't really the ones who have historically had the most to do with Wade, like Rogue, Wolverine, Better Late Than Never, and above all, Siren. The other major presence here is, of course, Vanessa, who is, from the comics, was involved with Wade, but crucially was herself a mutant copycat. That involvement with Wade just as often took the shape of mind-bendy impersonations and manipulations as it did straightforward romance. Supposedly, Vanessa's mutation was going to play a role in the abortive Tim Miller Deadpool sequel, but that obviously didn't carry through into David Leitch's version. Zooming out from the cast to what they're doing, comic book Wade also tends to be a far less earthbound presence than you'd imagine from the Fox movies. And to a point, that's not super remarkable. Everyone's doing intergalactic or interdimensional stuff these days, but with Deadpool, excursions beyond Earth are and always have been a recurring thing. In fact, the main ongoing storyline of that classic Kelly run isn't getting revenge on Ajax or tussling with the Great Lakes Avengers or anything. It's this big space opera storyline which places Wade as the hero prophesied to clear the way for a cosmic messiah's arrival. That's what he's doing the first time he comes across Captain America, for instance. And on that note, one of the most interesting parts of reading Deadpool is seeing the way the merc with a mouth interacts with quote-unquote real heroes. A lot of the time that results in disrespect and mockery, but sometimes our heroes are his heroes too. We've seen flashbacks to Wade as a child idolizing Cap a few times, and that admiration's absolutely visible in their present-day interactions. When Deadpool comes across Steve at the conclusion of that space opera, he's relieved to find a real hero he can hand the caper off to. Turns out Cap's been brainwashed by the Messiah and they end up tussling, but that is very much to Wade's chagrin. There are a few other dudes, like Spider-Man, that Wade has a broadly similar relationship to, so Yeah, we don't see this sort of thing in the films, but what makes the absence of this dynamic noteworthy is the knock-on effect. When Wade's approached for a team-up by Steve a few years later, he's starstruck, embarrassingly so. It turns out that's not the real Steve a little later, it's an evil clone, but the way Deadpool acts in his presence is telling, then and as their paths cross again and again. Wade's still a child next to his heroes, he still wants to be them, and he's still afraid that he isn't, that he can't be. And what this tells the Deadpool reader is that Wade's wider disrespect for people trying to do good doesn't just come from him being a knob generally, it comes from jealousy and insecurity. All the mid-tier heroes out there who aren't Cap but do still try to fight the good fight have to be frauds, have to be incompetent posers who deserve Wade's mockery, because if they're not, what's Wade's excuse exactly for not doing the same thing? That dickishness toward would-be do-gooders is something we do see in the films, but without the counterexamples provided by your Spideys and your Caps, that dickishness doesn't get contextualized into insecurity in the same way. We do of course see moments of insecurity with big screen Wade, but these tend to be focused around his physical appearance, which isn't not the case in the comics, but is definitely not the whole story, and is pretty far from being so. And on the topic of what's going on inside Wade's head, another thing we don't see in the films is Wade's internal monologue situation. Inexplicably, Wade spent Daniel Way's tenure as writer having multiple voices in his head. Initially, it seemed like this was just a thing now for Wade, who also seemed to have dropped a fair few IQ points between Cable and Deadpool in this run, the idea seeming to be that since this volume had fewer regular supporting characters, the silly voices and their random repartee would allow Wade to keep making quirky jokes and references, even when alone. It's true that for many a Deadpool fan, Poolhead? This isn't that stinging an omission. Way's run and the far sillier Wade it gave us remains divisive, but it's also true that this was a pretty characteristic part of Deadpool for a crucial period. People like to dunk on Way's writing, and I'm not going to pretend I can't see why, but his tenure on Deadpool did take the character from relative obscurity to the A-list, and this is even something that sort of carried over into Duggan and Pazane's subsequent run. The Deadpool 2013 annual retconned one of Wade's funny voices into being the result of an involuntary fusion with Madcap, this guy, and for the next year or two, that funny voice would be replaced by that of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who got trapped inside Wade's brain. That's not even the only aspect of Deadpool relating to Wade's mental state that didn't make the cut. Possibly a bigger omission is the perpetual unreliability of the character, and I'm not just talking about the pool-o-vision hallucination gags in Way's issues, especially since we kind of see that sort of thing for a moment in the first film's climax. No, even back in the Kelly run, Wade's memory and sense of self were flexible, and problematically so. It's revealed in issue 32 that Deadpool's early nemesis T-Ray wasn't in fact the murderer who'd nearly killed Wade in the past and had killed Wade's wife Mercedes. No, Deadpool was that murderer, and T-Ray was the real Wade Wilson. Now, we're talking about comic books here. Close your eyes and point at a guy and he's been retconned, but Wade's history takes this to an extreme, and let me tell you, reading the whole series front to back makes this clearer than ever. Practically anytime you hear something about Wade's past, it tends to contradict something you've been told before or something you've read before. And the whole T-Ray situation is far from the only time this instability's been made into the point. One of the most pivotal developments in modern Deadpool came with the reveal that a bloke named Bartol Utler, or Butler, had been controlling Wade to various degrees ever since his supposed exit from the Weapon Plus program, and absolutely blending Wade's brain with a high-strength chemical gumbo after each moment of contact. The result is the uneasy knowledge on the reader's part that some amount of the stuff we've seen him do or say or think in the past didn't necessarily happen. By leaning into the character's long-running unreliability, turning it into a part of Wade's story and then a plot device, Duggan and Pazane are able to kick off a bunch of really great stories. And if you're hearing me drop names like Madcap, T-Ray, and Butler, and you're thinking, who are all these arch-nemeses? Yeah, that's another thing. None of Wade's headline foes made it into these movies. On the page, Ajax is more Shocker than Green Goblin, in terms of stature, if not lethality. And we could go on like this for a while. But I think the biggest thing that we've not seen so far in Deadpool's movies, the most central part of the comic book character that hasn't been adapted, is, well, in my notes for this video I've written down oscillation. The thematic flavor of early Deadpool, particularly during the Kelly years, was a deterministic one. How much do good intentions count for against all the uncontrollable, malicious forces out there? How far are our actions determined by the world we live in? How far are they determined by the way others view us? Kelly had Deadpool go forward and back, between aspiring toward heroism and falling down into cruel apathy a few times. But it was never random. Let me give you an example. Siren, who at this point is almost Wade's Beatrice, inspires Deadpool to spare the life of Dr. Killbrew, the man who made him, and afterward Wade tries to pay it forward, tries to rescue Typhoid Mary and push her to do better. But Wade's bitten off more than he can chew. Mary goes on a killing spree and really gets inside Deadpool's head, digs right into those aforementioned insecurities, and makes Wade look like the villain. He's shaken. Barely holding it together, he seeks out Siren once more and acts like a weirdo, spooking her. Later on, it seems like she has a change of heart, seeks him out, accepts him, absolves him, loves him. But the next morning, it turns out it was Mary, having disguised herself with an image inducer to hurt Wade. That's sexual assault. It's not played as a joke. There's a sincere darkness here that's hard to fathom if your only exposure to Deadpool is in adaptation. It's a horrifying moment. What are Wade's intentions worth against a world that does this to him? And afterward, Wade snaps. For a while, he's a fiend, tormenting his friends, rejecting heroic duty, all that. Things get dark. Until they don't. Eventually, Wade's able to pick himself back up, make amends, and get back on the long path toward redemption. Versions of this dynamic ripple across early Deadpool. The world sinks, then buoys, then sinks Wade again. Intentionally or not, this sort of thing happens in the years after Kelly too, as different writers with different visions of Wade and different visions of heroism take over, have him do wildly different stuff, and make him go through hell after hell. Christopher Priest's Wade is a little less affable, more villainous, Jimmy Palmiotti's and Gail Simone's swing back the other way, and so on. Sometimes later writers even seem to consciously channel Kelly's oscillation. Duggan and Pazane's great The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly storyline puts Wade through awful trauma once again, has him backslide as a result, before picking him up just a little higher on the other side. And that's the thing. By the end of the Kelly run, it wasn't clear, but it did seem like all that struggle, all those oscillations, made a difference, pushed Wade a little more toward the light. In this sense, his run serves as a microcosm for everything since. All those incremental steps forward do count. Sure, under Duggan and Pazane, Deadpool lived through the worst day of his life, but the direct result of that was him finding his daughter and impacting her life for the better. Yeah, Deadpool has a daughter, by the way. Decades of oscillations from good to bad, breakdown to renewal, have pushed this character from envying Marvel's heroes to being one. One of the best Deadpool issues ever printed was Volume 6, Issue 20, penned by Duggan, art by Matteo Loli and Guru EFX. It's a standalone story that's become known as Don't Jump, and it sees Deadpool saving the life of a would-be suicide victim, taking a girl named Danielle on his rounds for a night, giving her a sense of her own agency before dropping her off at a clinic. The issue ends as Wade experiences the wit of the staircase, thinking of the best advice he could have given just a moment too late. You gotta remember, no matter how bad things get, that life is fluid. There's always the chance that something great is waiting right around the next corner. You just have to find a way to keep rounding corners. And that advice might sound a little platitudey out of context, but as we've seen, that advice is Deadpool. It is all those oscillations and the good that came from seeing them through. It is the progression from the pessimistic merc who sees himself as Destiny's garbage man and nothing more, to the Avengers member, Hydra-defeating father of Volume 6. And it's that progression that's missing from Deadpool's films. That's the biggest thing Fox left out. The films pick one vision of Wade and stick with it. Perhaps he is an anti-hero, but he never comes close to villainy. That's partially because he never truly loses his composure, he's never really driven to act against his aspirations, but it's also because Wade starts off and ends a pretty solid guy. He kills bad dudes, but that's about it. Even at his lowest point in Deadpool 2, the worst thing he does is kill bad dudes. He goes sad, not bad. And that's fine, it does make our protagonist more straightforwardly likable, but it also means the Deadpool films leave out that gradual, torturous, hard-won quest for redemption that animates Wade on the page, even when the quest fails. So there are a lot of things important to Deadpool's print history and characterization that aren't really included on screen. That is true. But, well, this isn't the whole story, is it? No, having spoken about what Fox left out, I think it's only fair we now consider what Fox left in. It's a lot easier to spot what's missing than to notice what isn't, because on a very basic level, this is Deadpool, right? The costume's great, he's got the katanas, and love it or lump it, he's doing the fourth wall breaks that have kind of been a part of the character since Mark Waid's early limited series, and definitely have been since at least the Priest run. Similarly, while it's aged an incredible amount in the 8 years since the first film's release, Waid's epic, quirky, so random dialogue and sense of humor undeniably capture the vibe Deadpool was known for, at least at the time. And I made a lot of the comic book's moments of darkness that are never quite matched on the screen, but they do tend to be just that. Moments. To be sure, there is real seriousness, but it's very rare that it's not leavened with silliness, crudeness, parody. There's a reason the above examples spring to mind so readily, and it's because they tend to be the exceptions. While highlights from across Deadpool's publication history might feature moments a little gloomier or less jokey than Fox ever got, it would just be incorrect to argue that these films don't channel the tone of Deadpool, particularly more recent incarnations, pretty accurately. And staying on the topic of those important character dynamics I outlined before, it's true that we don't see any of the A-listers Wade secretly respects, your Caps, your Spideys in these films, but again, that was never going to happen before Disney's Fox acquisition made that big corporate incursion take place. It's true also that, particularly in the first film, the mutant heroes we do see on screen tend not to be the most important ones to Comic Wade's development, but even if Fox switched the players around, they generally did well at maintaining the roles. Take Colossus, the way he functions as a respected, heroic mirror of what Wade could have been, what he could still be, the way he shows patience and belief in the Merc's potential that is ultimately sort of rewarded. The films essentially created in Colossus a composite of the roles Siren and Cap played for Wade in the 90s and the 10s respectively. So no, it's not the same thing, but it's coming from the same direction. Plus, I think there's another indirect fidelity to be seen here. Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead, together with the X-Force lineup in film 2, they're not really who Wade's kicking it with in the comics, but they are the right level of hero. They are this universe's C-listers. Deadpool, starting out in the background of his universe, does give these films the right feeling. On the topic of supporting characters, let's circle back to Vanessa. Earlier, we dwelled on the admittedly significant aspects of the character that didn't make it into live action, but apart from the copycat dimension, there is a lot of fidelity here, even right down to little individual moments. The unlikely romance between a sex worker and a mercenary, the cancer-stricken Wade leaving her before things get bad to spare her, straight from the page. And that's true across the pictures. That Francis bit, the way Wade keeps ripping on Ajax's real name.
How tough can he be? With a name like Francis.
Francis?
That's his legal name. He got Ajax from a dish soap.
That's a deep cut too. And hey, Ajax. Even if he does look different, even if he's never been Deadpool's arch-enemy, Ajax is here, playing the same general role in Wade's origin that he did 20 years back. The film sort of folds Killbrew into his character too, but that's not exactly a massive difference. Similarly, in film 2, The Juggernaut, he's not just a random ex-villain being included here, either. Again, he isn't one of Wade's most iconic foes, but he was one of his first. He plays a very similar secondary villain role in that early Wade series. Wade with an ID, that is. Same series Black Tom Cassidy plays a role in. And thinking back to Deadpool's insecurity, it is true that the films narrow this down from the basic driving force of this character's whole thing into a primarily physical hang-up, but it's also true that the physical side of it has often been a big deal for Wade in the books. It's true that Wade isn't a parent in the films, not technically, that Ellie and the significant shift her presence brings is not adapted, but it's also true that the second film has Deadpool take on an important parent-adjacent role. And let's not forget the neat way it sort of interpolates the comic's classic Wade death romance. So yes, a lot is left out, a lot is changed, but a lot isn't. Only a small fraction of other important characters make the leap from page to screen. The films pick one largely heroic vision of the protagonist and never go too far beyond it, and the instability and unreliability that's defined Wade Wilson's story is almost entirely absent. But even so, what is this but Deadpool? It's a Deadpool, not the Deadpool to be sure, but we were never really going to get the Deadpool, were we? There's always stuff that gets left out, good and bad alike. That's just the nature of channeling decades of continuity and varying characterizations into a few short hours of screen time. Adaptation on this scale is never trying to squeeze every element of something into a tiny new container. It's like choosing which of those elements to shine your spotlight on. The Deadpool films leave plenty out, but pretty much everything within their spotlight has come from somewhere in the character's history. And I think that's a better way of judging accuracy in adaptation. The big screen Deadpool franchise is just one more take on the character. Like any take, its time will pass, and another with a differently directed spotlight will follow. There's something that's bothered me about seeing Ryan Reynolds' Fox-verse Deadpool careen into the MCU in trailers and promo spots and posters over the past few months. Broadly, it's the same thing that's bothered me about the rumblings of Fox-verse X-Men or Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man showing up in future Avengers films. It's related to the issues I have with No Way Home I talked about in this video a while back, and to the reason I hope all those "they're bringing back the dead Avengers" rumors are unfounded. In case I haven't made it clear, I like the Deadpool films. Ryan Reynolds is great in the role, and the tone, the cast, the idea of this take on Deadpool works for me. If there is a character that should survive the death of the Foxverse and make that jump unrebooted to the MCU, it's Deadpool. But, I mean, is there? I don't want to tell you how to feel about this movie or about these characters, but for me, one of the coolest parts about figures and media like this is the sort of palimpsestic quality that arises from a character being rebooted and reimagined and rewritten over and over again. New writers bring their own ideas, throw out existing bits that don't fit, that sort of thing, and over a long enough time span, what's compelling about a character gets developed and what isn't falls away. I'm not saying I think 3 films with this Deadpool is too many. I'm not even saying 4 would be, but I am saying that I don't think this version of the character should become the character. Ryan Reynolds has said he's done with the character after this, but Hugh Jackman said that in the past, and so has Patrick Stewart. Especially with more big, cross-dimensional team-ups round the corner, I feel more than a little hesitant to take Reynolds at his word here. Now, I don't think a rebooted, MCU-native version of Deadpool would necessarily be better, work this well, but it's undeniable that doubling down on Foxpool leaves more traces of this version in the palimpsest, and there are already quite a few traces. Just look at Scotty Young's post-Deadpool 1 run on the comic book for proof that the print-to-cinema relationship is not a one-way street. And take it from someone who's read the lion's share of Deadpool stories both before and after these films came out, there's definitely less variance in characterization post-2016 than pre. For me, the worry here is that all those elements outside that spotlight might sink further into darkness, that the sense of motion and growth and oscillation that allowed Deadpool's story to become such a compelling one calcifies in the face of this vision's sustained bankability. I think we'd stand to lose a lot of what's special about a character like this, beyond the chimichangas and the fourth wall breaks, if this were to happen. Over the course of working on this video, of poring over this character's back catalogue, I've seen a lot of Deadpools. I've seen ones that didn't super work and ones that did. I've seen him at his lowest and I've seen him at his highest. So it isn't that I want to see any one version of the character prevail, or that I want to see any one Deadpool disappear. I just hope he's able to keep rounding corners. Actually, maybe there is one way in which Deadpool needs to change. I reckon he needs to get an extra wallet. It's not the 90s anymore, Wade. Rob Liefeld's not drawing you anymore. Trade in your big, silly, bulky pouches for one of Extra's sleek, stylish card holders, like this Parliament wallet in green they sent me, or this glow-in-the-dark Eclipse card holder. They also sent me their new Finder card, which works with Apple's Find My network. Great if you're a normal guy like me who wants to make sure you never lose your wallet again, possibly even better if you're a superpowered mercenary with a penchant for tracking people. Just saying. It's been like a year since Extra first sent me some of their swag, and I've used their products just about every day. One of my friends even got his wallet nicked in that time, and I gave him one of my Extra card holders as a replacement, and now he's just as Extra-pilled as me. Extra are running a 25% off sale until the 21st of August, but you can use my code PILLAR at checkout to unlock even more saving. So maybe go have a look. Be pretty cool if you did. Anyway, I hope you liked my little essay. Fingers crossed it doesn't immediately age poorly. Thanks to friend of the channel Adam Myers for suggesting this video idea, and if you want a say in what topics I handle, the next video topic poll should be going up alongside this video's release over on Patreon. Signing up also gets you a bunch of other cool perks, including bonus videos, and given the ratio of Deadpool in to Deadpool out my brain's recently experienced, there's a pretty good chance the next one of these will have to do with old Wade Wilson in some capacity too. Thanks for watching though, and special gratitude as always to all my backers on Patreon and YouTube, especially Hanan, Daniel Goldhorn, Magath, Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy. Bye.